Welcome to today's lecturette. I'm Dr. Leslie Jones, and today we'll be examining the role of research with and about children. And we'll take a brief look at how different approaches to research and the design of research projects can help highlight different aspects of child development that in turn inform our professional practice and public policy. So research, in fact all research, is designed to explore a phenomenon or a problem, and there are quite structured ways about going about doing this. The structure of research is important as it provides the consumer of the research findings a sense of comfort that the findings have been proven through testing the validity of the claims, and if the study is making generalisations, that the sample size that's been used is sufficient to draw conclusions across a much larger context than just the project itself. Researchers go to lengths to justify their work against these types of criteria and to call out the limitations of their work to the reader if any exist. The objective of research is to help to uncover previously not understood aspects of that particular phenomenon under study. In our case, the research that we'll be discussing in this unit is focused on uncovering the influences on child development. The examples of research projects that are in your text map really quite well to the ecological systems theory that we've unpacked and spoken about before in previous lecturettes. So as we move through this lecturette, I encourage you to see the synergies of the research that we're talking about and the micro, meso, exo and macro system that underpin the projects and the systems that have engaged with the findings to inform public policy and professional practice. There are three foundational types of research that you're likely to come across, and these are quantitative, qualitative and mixed methods. Qualitative research on child development will examine volume, counts and frequency of different aspects of child development. Quantitative studies help uncover how often something is happening. For example, the AECD data highlights how many children start school with developmental vulnerability and in what domains. But this type of research will not tell us why these children are entering school vulnerable. That is the job of qualitative research. Qualitative research explores the reasons a phenomenon is present in the first place. Here, the focus of research is to uncover, for example, why so many children might be entering school developmentally vulnerable. Qualitative research can go to great lengths to explore the why things are happening and uses a range of techniques to gather data that can be triangulated to see if the why is common or isolated and unique. Does it occur over time or in a moment of time? And are there enabling or constraining conditions that lead to the why? In more recent decades, the use of mixed methods research is gaining popularity. This style of research gathers both quantitative data and then samples some of the data and applies qualitative methods to this as well. In these cases, the researchers can then produce findings that tell us both how much of something is happening as well as why that thing might be occurring in the research findings in the first place. There are multiple research approaches that researchers draw upon to examine the issue or the phenomenon that they are exploring. Your text unpacks four types of research approaches, and these are longitudinal, ethnographic, collaborative, and participative. Each type of research approach can help highlight or elucidate details about children's development and the influences that help shape overall child outcomes. Each of them is quite different, and we'll just take now some time to have a little bit more of an exploration around the different approaches and what they mean and the sorts of findings that they can actually uncover. Large-scale longitudinal studies are aimed to include measures of children's characteristics and multiple contexts of their development. By gathering data over time, these studies enable the identification of developmental trajectories that lead children towards positive or negative outcomes, as well as the transition points and experiences that influence the diverse pathways children follow. Longitudinal research takes a sustained multidimensional approach to studying the provisions of quality programs in childcare settings from a range of perspectives and is able to bring a deeper, more nuanced understanding to the complex processes and practices in these settings that may benefit children's experiences and developmental outcomes. Longitudinal study of Australian children was research that was conducted over 17 years. This is the case study that is in your text. Federal and state governments were interested in using this data to inform public policy that would help strengthen families and community contexts where children grow up. Researchers examined household context, childcare settings, school context, as well as accessing linkage data, including the health records of children in the program, the quality ratings of their childcare services, and NAPLAN results as the children became older. This study attempts to assess the potential risks and the protective factors identified in previous research and to identify the support resources that families have access to for their children. And bringing all of those data points together over time paints a really comprehensive picture of what was actually happening for those children and their families in the context of their local community. The benefits of this style of research is that the sample size was quite large, 10,000 children, so 5,000 infants and 5,000 children that were a little bit older. So when a study is that large, we can have some comfort around making some generalisations made from the findings in the study that might be reflective of the broader society. But generalisation needs to be carefully considered. Any time that we take a generalisation of findings from research, we will inevitably find families who do not follow the trends. And as professionals, we need to be mindful how we use the generalised findings for this type of reason. The most interesting insights that longitudinal research offers us are the trends that can be identified across time. Think back to Bronfenbrenner's model and the chrono system. Some longitudinal studies have been running for over 50 years and include studies like the 7-Up series. And I'd highly recommend people to go onto YouTube and have a look at some of the clips that came out of that longitudinal study. They're quite remarkable. But thinking back over a study that took 50 years to complete, imagine the changing trends that this research has highlighted from the 1960s until well into the 21st century. The second research approach that I want to discuss with you is that of ethnographic studies. Ethnographic studies seek to understand the complex relationships and context that underpin children's development and experiences. The researchers spend significant time with the child in situ in their naturalistic places of school and childcare and family, so that they can immerse themselves in the context that they are exploring and the child's relationship with the people in their micro and exosystems to gain a deep understanding of the child's development and the influences at play. They will use a range of data collection points, including observations, interviews, photographs, audio and video recordings, and the collection of artefacts, such as policy documents from schools and childcare settings, and even drawings from the children themselves. All of these data points are examined for synergies and divergences and themes that help the researcher build a comprehensive picture of the context and the phenomenon that they are exploring in order that they can draw conclusions and propose findings. The benefits of an ethnographic study is that it provides a very detailed tracing of the child's experience and development in the everyday. Data is collected in naturalistic settings of the lived experiences of children, so no experiments and no settings that are unfamiliar to the child or the family. And the data is collected from multiple perspectives and can really begin to draw inference as to why certain conditions and outcomes may be present. Ethnographic studies are excellent for exploring the cultural and political values, the power relationships, family systems and practice theories and public policy being enacted. Exploring the lived experiences of children and families through ethnography also allows researchers to challenge other less nuanced research, so that can be helpful in providing a counterposition or providing a balanced perspective against broader qualitative studies. The drawback, however, of ethnographic studies are that they tend to be quite small, so drawing generalisations from them can be quite difficult. The findings and conclusions drawn from such studies are relevant for those participants that have been the subject of the study, not necessarily reflective of larger populations. A form of research that is certainly gaining in popularity in early childhood settings and elsewhere is that of collaborative research. Research collaborations in early childhood settings is research that is jointly constructed and conducted by people whose primary activity is the research, and others whose primary work is with young children, or those who develop and administer policies and programs for young children. Collaborative research brings together a range of people with differing perspectives, and this is a real strength of the approach because it's likely to generate more meaningful research questions and research design. The lived experience, like the ground up perspective of those working with children, marries well to the more academic focus of the researchers who are pure researchers. So the focus of study is apt to be highly relevant to the people working with young children and their families because they have a say in how the research is being constructed and designed, and also the types of questions that are most relevant for them in their working and professional lives. And the findings and recommendations derived from research that is co-designed in this way is likely to be highly actionable by those people working with children and with families. It is also a research approach that enables the voice of practitioners to be readily heard. In other research approaches, the participant's voice or the practitioner's voice in designing the project and setting the research questions is not routinely incorporated. In effect, the biggest difference between collaborative research and other types of research is that collaborative research is done with participants, while the alternative models of research often feel like the research is being done to participants. The difference with this is a greater level of ownership of the research process and the recommendations and finding by the very people who are most likely to want to use the findings in their everyday professional lives. Expanding on the notion of the participant's voice in collaborative research, I'd like to talk about the notion of researching with children. Children's voice in research is still really quite limited, and they are definitely still often seen as subjects rather than participants. But we do have examples of collaborative research approaches with children and even quite young children. There is a greater movement to recognise children as informed and competent experts who are able to make valuable contributions to research in their own right. This, of course, aligns to a very contemporary view of children as rights bearers and agentic individuals, as we discussed in our very first lecturette. However, there is a greater movement to recognise children as informed and competent experts who are able to make valuable contributions to research in their own right. This, of course, aligns with a contemporary view of children as rights bearers and agentic individuals that we discussed right back in our very first lecturette. This is a working example of how our actions can be influenced by the manner in which children are positioned, the power relationships that are in place, and the willingness of adults to move beyond the status quo. Researchers working with children have to make accommodations for children's developmental maturity and are creative with their data collection points to capture the broader sample of data that includes things like visual as well as verbal approaches to gather insights from children. And the ethics of researching with children is stringent and must pass the highest levels of ethical clearance. But the insights gathered with children about their everyday lived experiences is critical to the broader discussion of child development and the influence of context. Understanding formal research is a complex undertaking. Answering important questions about child development and contextual influences is interesting and important work. This overview has sought to unpack just some of the basics of the types of research and the approaches to researching with children and about children, and to act as a background to our next lecturette, which is going to be around exploring the use of big data that is generated from research approaches. Thank you for sharing today's lecturette with me, and I look forward to our next session of Children, Families and Communities.